August 23rd, 1956, the U.S. government didn't just censor a revolutionary discovery that would have changed everything we know about health and energy. They incinerated it. 6 tons of books, journals, and scientific research were burned at Gansevoort Incinerator in New York City to erase the work of one man. This government-ordered destruction, carried out by the FDA, doesn't just mark the most extraordinary, despicable, and unparalleled case of censorship documented in U.S. history, could have unlocked the secrets to fight cancer, reduce pain, and improve numbers of mental and physical health ailments. Instead of unwarranted book burnings, unjustified imprisonment, and premature death. But the terrifying part of this tragedy is why the government and FDA felt so threatened by this research discovery that they went through such extreme measures to erase the life work and ultimately Reich from existence. A story that up until today is one that typically gets told just as it was systemically set up to tell. So who exactly was Wilhelm Reich? Reich served as an officer in the Austrian army during World War I, and upon return home, he enrolled in Vienna University, studying medicine, and quickly took up interest in mental health. He became the deputy director of Sigmund Freud's outpatient clinic, and helped establish the first sexual advisory clinic alongside of Marie Frischow. Then in 1934, Reich moved to Oslo, Norway. During the 5 years it was in Oslo, he began conducting what he called his Bion experiments. And from within these experiments, the expression orgone energy originated, to which he believed was vital to all living things, human health, and happiness. But the most controversial part of this orgone energy was how he claimed that it played a key role in achieving physical and emotional fulfillment through orgasm. In 1939, he accepted a position as an assistant professor at the New School of Social Research in New York City. Shortly upon arriving to New York, he began building devices that he came to call the orgone energy accumulators, that were insulated boxes about the size of an old-time phone booth and were similar to that of a Faraday cage. And these devices, he claimed, could collect and concentrate this energy that would in turn help heal the body, decrease pain, improve one's mental or emotional state, also claiming that he had even seen tumors shrink or even disappear in mice that had cancer when placed in these accumulators, which sparked significant interest in figures such as writer William Burroughs and Albert Einstein. However, at large, his ideas and his device were dismissed and ridiculed by the scientific community. Many felt that his claims weren't just outlandish, but were unprovable and fraudulent, and eventually led to his being fired from the university on the grounds that he was making a fraudulent claim to have some machine that would cure cancer. So, but just after 2 years of being in New York City, Reich purchased a farm in Maine that he named Orgonen, and this became his new home and center for his research. And initially it seemed like things were actually turning the corner for him. His theories and these devices began to gain some devoted followers, until an article, The Strange Case of Wilhelm Reich, written by Mildred Brady in 1947, was published in The New Republic, where she painted him out to be some kind of dangerous cult leader who was promoting this bizarre blend of sexual liberation and pseudoscience, and that he was building and selling sex boxes under the audacious notion that they would cure things from the common cold to cancer. This article, that was quickly followed up by a second, once again stirred up the controversy and criticism, as well as caught the attention of the federal authorities. And then in February 10th, 1954, the FDA declared that these devices and his promotional material were medically simply worthless, and that all of it was nothing more than pseudoscience and fraud, despite their being able to find or produce a single dissatisfied consumer or patient who owned or used his accumulators, requested an injunction forbidding him to transport any of his accumulators or promotional material across state lines. And in response to this complaint, Reich wrote a letter to the federal court, to which part of Reich's response included, to appear in court as a defendant in matters of basic natural research would in itself appear, to say the least, extraordinary. Scientific matters cannot possibly ever be decided upon in court. The sole purpose of this complaint is to entangle orgonomic basic research in endless costless procedure, which will accomplish exactly nothing rational or useful to human society. Inquiry in the realm of basic law is outside the judicial domain of this or any other country of social administration anywhere on this globe. Man's right to know, to learn, to inquire, to make bona fide errors, to investigate human emotions must, by all means, be safe if the word freedom should ever be more than an empty political slogan. If painstakingly elaborated and published scientific findings over a period of 30 years could not convince discovery of the life energy, no litigation in court anywhere will ever help to do so. I therefore submit in the name of truth and justice that I shall not appear in court as the defendant against a plaintiff who by his mere complaint already has shown his ignorance in matters of natural science. On the basis of these considerations, I submit that the case against Orgonomy be taken out of court completely. However, the court claims never to have received it, and as such, the FDA's injunction was approved and upheld. And while Reich was in Arizona in May of 1956, Michael Silvert, who was an associate of Reich's and looking over the inventory and the farm while he was away, had sent an accumulator part through the mail to an FDA inspector posing as a customer, requesting that they needed a replacement part for their accumulator, violating the injunction, and both Reich and Silvert were charged with contempt of the court order. And on May 7, 1956, Reich was sentenced to 2 years of imprisonment. The Wilhelm Reich Foundation was fined $10,000, and it was ordered for all accumulators, associated literature, and research to be destroyed. And on June 5th, the FDA arrived at Orgone Farm to oversee the destruction of the accumulators, as it was stated in the order that they were simply to oversee it and not the ones to actually be doing the destruction. So the agents stood by and watched Reich's associates, his friends, and his son Peter, 12 at the time, dismantle the accumulators with axes. His son then placed an American flag over their remnants, and just a little over a month later, on August 23rd, 6 tons of books, writings, journals, and research studies were incinerated at the public facility in Gansevoort, New York. And as with the accumulators, it was ordered that the FDA were simply to oversee the process, as well as Reich and the Orgone Institute Press being responsible for all expenses and labor involved, to which on top of their associates, friends, and family, rented a huge truck and hired 3 additional men to help. That later, Victor Sobey, one of Reich's associates and friends, goes on to write, "It felt like people who, when they were to be executed, are made to dig their grave first and then shot and tossed in it. As for hours, we carried box after box, tossing them one at a time into the burning hot coals as they stood by and watched mercilessly." Meanwhile, Reich tried to appeal the lower court's decision for his upcoming sentence, which his request was declined on December 11th. He then proceeded to write several times to J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FDA, in which he received no response. Then proceeded with filing an appeal with the Supreme Court, which on February 25th, that they had decided that they were unwilling to review his case. And on March 12th, 1957, Reich and Silver were sent to the Dansbury Federal Prison. November 3rd, 1957, Reich didn't show up for roll call and was found at 7 a.m. in his bed. The prison doctor said that Reich had died through the night due to myocardial insufficiency and sudden heart failure, just 7 days shy of his scheduled release on November 10th. Then 6 months later, in May of 1958, Michael Silver, Reich's associate, committed suicide. Not a single academic journal published an obituary or memorandum. Not a soul from the AMA, National Academy of Science, the NIMH, or any of the doctors and scientists from within the scientific community stood up to defend him outside of the handful of associates in Organon, while the press, the FDA, the FBI, and every prosecutor and judge in the local court system, the Supreme Court, or politician that laid eyes or heard about such a case either promoted, encouraged, or turned their head in the knowing that book burning was impermissible and illegal, as was throwing people into prison for thought crimes or arresting physicians for developing successful therapy, all to which voluntarily ignoring their oath to protect the Constitution. But Reich's story is so much more than just a personal tragedy, and the suppression of his work wasn't just an attack on one man's idea. It was also an intentional and deliberate setback and delay in breakthroughs that could have changed healthcare and saved countless of lives. Because Reich didn't just study psychology, nor was orgone energy purely about having orgasms. In fact, most of his research was on cellular function, structure, and the transference of energy, and how this is linked to illness, cancer, pain, inflammation, mental health, as well as healing. And what Reich discovered during his bion experiments is that bions and energy vesicles, the structure within or outside of a cell, designate one and the same microscopically visible functioning formation, and that these bions are the elemental functioning unit of all living matter, and at the same time are the bearer of quantum energy, and as such function in a specifically biological way. And many times through his readings, he was actually just using the orgasm as an example to kind of almost help paint a picture how this functional formation takes place, as it has the same functional formation across the board, be that at the cellular level, systemically within our different organ systems, emotionally, as well as during an orgasm. And this function, which he calls the TC function, which is tension, charge, discharge, and relaxation. Tension being the buildup of energy. The charge being the accumulation and intensification of this energy. The discharge being the release of this energy. And the relaxation being the recovery period. And that happens automatically, again, across the board, whether it's at the cellular level, the emotional level, sexual energy, or an orgasm. Which, I mean, you kind of got to give the man some credit. Even if you're not one to want to openly discuss or talk about orgasm, most can probably still envision this tension, charge, discharge, relaxation function in terms of sexual energy and grasping how this could imply off of this vision at the cellular, emotional, or environmental level. And because this is essential or sustains life, it's critical for our cells to maintain this balance. And when there's not a balance or a blockage, kind of like when a battery loses its charge, our cells and organs or emotional state become dysfunctional, leading to weakened immune responses, pain and inflammation, uncontrolled cell growth, such as cancer, and are the root of many diseases. And as accumulators, therefore, were kind of like a battery charging station, or helping to restore the energy level of our battery. And as accumulators constructed alternating layers of organic and metallic materials, similar to that of like a capacitor, as the organic materials were good insulators, making them capable of holding the charge and not rapidly dissipating, and the metal being a conductor, allowing for collection and redistribution of of the energy, kind of like static electricity, sitting in these boxes with the concentrated charge, could then influence the body's own bioelectricity activity, restoring the body to a proper energy flow, to which we are just now validating through modern research is exactly the case. And these energy systems within our cells and organs are imperative for our health, as well as preventing degeneration. But furthermore, the US government knew that if his ideas had even but a kernel of truth, they were going to be extremely disruptive in terms of it having a negative impact on authority and the broader systems of power that the government rely on, such as the FDA. The NIH plays a central role in determining what constitutes as valid medical science or valid treatment, therefore validating Reich's discovery about energy-based treatment or theories that in turn would undermine the government's authority, being able to regulate medicine and being the gatekeeper of healthcare solutions. But even more so, would have had a tremendous impact on their financial revenue, as the pharmaceutical industry contributes significantly towards the U.S. economy, with companies paying substantial taxes and fees to regulatory companies such as the FDA. So a shift from these chemical-based treatments to energy-based treatments would have reduced the amount of income that the FDA is getting, and therefore how much taxes that the government's making off of it, and fundamentally shift from drug-based therapy to energy-based therapy, that the pharmaceutical company relies heavily on these chemical-based models, treats symptoms rather than the root cause, having long-term dependency on these drugs, and Reich's accumulators could have provided non-invasive, self-administrating therapy with a treatment that addressed the root cause, which would have drastically reduced the amount of medications and prescriptions for even chronic pain, mental disorders such as depression, anxiety, cancer, or autoimmune disease, to which the pharmaceutical companies generate billions annually treating these chronic conditions. Cancer therapies such as chemo and immunotherapy bring in $200 billion annually. Mental health drugs, antidepressants, and antipsychotics, over $20 billion annually. Pain management, such as NSAIDs or opioids, bring in $80 billion annually. And by their having these accumulators at home, would also decrease their need to be seen as frequently in clinics or hospitals in order to get these prescriptions refilled, cutting profits even more, as well as reducing the fees that they get from these companies. And by suppressing his work, prevented any of that from happening, as well as send out the message to any other innovator thinkers, just in case they got a wild hair up their sleeve, about what happens to you if you dare try to cross the powers to be. And in turn, government's willingness for this censorship to maintain control, as well as continue to receive their financial gain, has cost so much setback, delayed advancements in cancer research, mental health treatment, and holistic medicine by decades, to which the societal cost of these delays, measured in lives lost, chronic suffering, and financial burden, are incalculable. With Reich being a psychoanalyst and his studying in mental health, as well as what he witnessed in Europe, was fully aware of what these individuals are capable of, to which he wrote an extremely powerful piece in 1948 about the dangers possessed by narcissistic psychopathic leaders, the societal danger that these individuals bring, as well as the implications that these leaders and the institutions they run have on society. And because these individuals lack of empathy and are completely about their own personal gain, manipulating the masses through fear and propaganda, disregarding the truth, freedom, innovation in favor of consolidating their power, and prevent advancements by stifling individual autonomy, and that the suppression of individuality leads to widespread alienation, frustration, and despair, and risks the collapse of freedom. His writing, titled Little Man, is a timeless warning about the dangers that these narcissistic psychopathic leaders create and challenges us as individuals to take responsibility for protecting our freedom and fostering innovation for human progress. This piece serves as a broader call to defend the truth and a message that resonates just as powerfully today in the state of our society as it did when it was written. Nobody deserves what these people bestow, so focus on you. Fuck the narcissist.